Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again. I was just saying to Barry that this might be a hard subject for me, so I've got my box of tissues right next to me. But it's a very, very important topic. And what we're talking about today is signs that you're in a dangerous relationship. And a lot of the work that I do is with people that have suffered from narcissistic abuse. And a lot of the traits that I'm going to actually tell you here now, because I think it's really important to list the signs. They are attributed to narcissistic behavior, but not every narcissist is going to become physically violent. I have to say that. But many of the traits that I'm going to read off for you here, because I made a list, because I think it's just really important that you get it very clearly what these signs are, these warning signs. And today's show, I am going to cry, is a memory of a beautiful young woman called Alessia Sinkova, and she was only 35 years old, the mother of 3 children, who has an incredible story of escaping violence in the Ukraine. She managed to escape into Germany with her 3 young children, who were 4, 6, and 8 at the time. This was 2 years ago. She built a new life for herself in Germany. She was an incredibly, just the most beautiful soul I think I've ever met. She was a yoga teacher, Kundalini yoga, a speaker. She spoke about not having to be in positions of power to do great things, and that within all of us, we have the capacity to lead and to have an impact on other people's lives. And that's what she did while she was in Germany, was coach other people, especially people, refugees that had come from the Ukraine. And anyway, unfortunately, she was in an abusive relationship, and she wanted to leave, and unfortunately, she was murdered by her husband. And it's so tragic because, as I said, she was, coursing a whole new life for herself in Germany and her children. And now these 3 young children, now aged 6, 8, and 10, are without parents because the father was arrested for her murder. So anyway, I got through that, but I just wanted to do this show in memory of her, and that her life was short, but she had great impact in the world. And I hope that it will also serve as a lesson to people that are minimizing abusive behavior in their relationships.
Yeah.
So before I go into the list, do you have anything to add, Barry, to that?
I didn't know about this, so thank you for sharing this. It always saddens me when I hear about this because it's so not so distressing, but it's so disheartening when somebody doesn't notice the warning signs and get themselves out of situations, and they end up suffering such a horrendous. Not always being murdered, that's one extreme, but having situations be so bad that it's like they tolerate so much abuse and pain and suffering without taking care of themselves. And so I definitely feel for that. The things also I want to add one piece, which is basically you started talking about narcissistic relationships, but truth is abuse and narcissism are not tied together, as you said, but also the other side where sometimes abusive relationships have nothing to do with narcissism too.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are things that happen because of ego, because of positioning, because other things we'll get into of why things happen as well. But the warning signs are very important. So yeah, let's get into the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I even mentioned the narcissism is because the list that I compiled, which is based on dangerous relationships, not on narcissism, as I was going through it, I was thinking, oh my God, these all occur within a narcissistic relationship. There is definitely a correlation between a lot of this stuff. But as you say, not every narcissist will end up murdering. And there are many other factors. We've talked about it before in other shows. We've talked about attachment styles, and we've talked about even when we think another person is responsible for our happiness, or another person is responsible for the feelings of love we have, when we ignore the fact that actually those feelings are generated within us, whether they're feelings of love they're coming from within in us, whether they're feelings of abandonment and rage and wanting to control another person, they're coming from within us. The other person did not cause any of these feelings.
This is the thing. Absolutely, yeah. And just to underscore that, it's like definitely being in a relationship with somebody who starts blaming you for their upset, their wounding, their hurt, because they're not willing to take responsibility is definitely one of those issues.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. So I'm going to read through all of these signs and then we'll go through them, one by one. But one of the first signs is control.
Hmm.
Constantly trying to control your every action, decision, your appearance, what you say, what you do. That overbearing control, isolating you, isolating you from your friends and your family, and they can do this by not just physically isolating you, which can happen, but by also having you mistrust your friends and your family, and that brings in the gaslighting, the
Yeah.
distorting of your truth, the questioning what you see and what you know, and making you think that you're going crazy. And again, as I said, they can turn you against your family and your friends by saying, well, your family says this about you, your family says you're crazy, or your friends think you're this. So it's a way of separating and isolating. um, verbal abuse, threatening, whether they lay a fist on you or not, the threats. I mean, I've had somebody's fist skim my nose and hit a wall right in front of me and saying, I wish this was your face. Now that is I mean, it is extremely damaging, that alone, never mind if it goes one step further and becomes physical. But just that, living in dread or threat of being attacked. Jealousy, extreme jealousy and possessiveness and mistrusting you and following you and stalking. I mean, we've done shows on this before, a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
things. Manipulating you, like guilt ridden you, telling you that if you leave them, they're going to die, they're going to kill themselves. Well, you know what? I mean, murder suicide is huge. It's like again, that belief, you were the source of my happiness and my love. Therefore, if I can't have you, nobody else is going to have you, and I'm going to murder you, and I'm going to kill myself. Um, the lack of respect, respecting our boundaries, feeling you have a right to push somebody else around and make them do what, you're bidding, what you want to do. Um,
Hmm.
frequent mood swings, that sort of the uncontrollable, that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, you say the wrong thing and they feel entitled to rip your head off, maybe verbally, but, it could again slip into physical violence. Um, fear, keeping you scared of being alone, scared of, denying you financial independence, keeping the finances all to themselves, giving you a handout each week if you're in a relationship and you're a stay-at-home parent, which we're going to do next week. We're going to talk about triad wives and the pros and cons of that. But
Hmm.
these are all signs that if you are living in fear, if you're feeling like you can't express yourself, that you're not free to just speak your mind without being attacked or verbally or even physically. I mean, I'm talking about dangerous relationships. I was often talk about the psychological damage that this sort of behavior can cause, but add in the physical as well. It's also extremely physically dangerous as well as psychologically dangerous, and it's not to belittle the psychological danger you go through. I mean, most people that come out of these type of relationships with their life are broken. Not, hopefully they get back on their feet, but there's a period of time where they they doubt themselves. They don't, they blame themselves for having allowed this to get worse and worse and worse. But as we know, it's the boiling the frog. It starts off very mildly, and then there's all this sort of, I love you, I love you, I love you, put you back on the pedestal, please forgive me, I'll never do
Hmm.
it again. All of these things. And it's just, when somebody has a lack of control like that, trust it, trust it. They can't get over it. It's not something you can just not do again. If your emotions are so wildly out of control, it can, violence can happen again. And they may be sorry after the fact. Nobody's saying they're not sorry, but you cannot, it's like having a wild animal.
Hmm.
You can't, they say, like, baby tigers are really cute when they're little cubs, but, don't own a tiger. Don't
Right.
date or be in a relationship with somebody that has impulse control in the sense that they can turn violent. So, yes. So, Barry, join in here.
Well, first of all, let's take a deep breath, everybody, who's listening. That might be quite a lot of stuff to take on. So just to be clear, we're describing a lot of things that can happen, but doesn't mean you have to take them all personally. So take a breath, and we'll get into more of the whys and wherefores and everything as well. One of the common threads to all of this, for me, is the person who's on the receiving end of this, their own self-trust is being undermined
Mhm.
on some way or form. So one of the biggest things I think we take from this as a homework assignment is to really build our own self-trust going forward, even if you're not in a relationship, but to really focus on that, because the challenge is when you're in a relationship with somebody, it can be tempting to put your trust in them automatically because you're in a relationship with them, rather than have them earn it.
Mhm.
And the difference is important. It's funny because I wrote an article about that for a business group. I mean, it's talking about trustworthiness, and it's vital in business, but something business important relationship too is that you had to earn the right to be trusted. And so, even though a person is perfect and wonderful, and everything else, don't presume things yet.
Mhm.
I'm not saying you'd be on guard all the time looking for anything to go wrong, but notice where things don't fit, as well as things that do fit. So you build a picture of the person that's complete, not just what's like you're trying to picture a landscape. You only see one paint, one color. It's like you need to have all the colors to make the landscape work. So you're going to know all the things about the person rather than just seeing through one lens only. So this is as a simple answer, this is one of the pieces to the solution of that.
Yeah. Now, I want to jump in here because there's a very important part. And, again, our childhood, how we were raised, really impacts how we show up in life in
Yes.
future
Yeah.
relationships. Now, if you've grown up in a household where you were gaslit by a parent who,
Hmm.
could have been a narcissist, who basically says, no, that didn't happen to you. No, that feeling of this isn't right is not, like, that person didn't touch you inappropriately, you misread it, you didn't, so often children are, their trust in themselves is undermined. And
Yes.
I know that was a fact for me 100%. My reality was denied. My pain, my fear, my abuse was denied.
Yeah.
What happens when you do that is you're trained from a very early age not to trust yourself and to trust others, because as a small child, you have to trust your parents. There's no way you can just leave a parent and say, well, you're gaslighting me. I'm going to go and take care of myself. I trust my own inner voice. You're given a choice. You either trust yourself or your parent, because the two cannot exist within the same space for a young child. So
Hmm.
often it's people that have had trauma in their childhood that will keep their hand on that burning hot stove. I mean, my therapist used to say to me, "Take your hand off the stove; it's burning you." And I'd be like, "No, it's fine. It's fine. My hand's not burning. I can take it." It's like,
Right.
no, your hand is burning. Listen to the signals. Your body is telling you. It's never abandoned you. It's always telling you you have at some point disconnected from it, or you've chosen not to listen to it because you've decided that somebody else's opinion
And yours.
is better than yours, or the one that you need to listen to. So really
Absolutely.
go inside, and that's my real guidance here is, if you have suffered any type of abuse like that as a child, and that you haven't resolved it and haven't overcome it, the likelihood of you tolerating abuse in a relationship is much, much higher, because
Absolutely.
you're just accustomed to it.
Yeah. In fact, to underscore that and say, here's the thing. If you went through something like that as a child and you haven't been seeing a therapist or a coach or a counselor, before you even date somebody,
Hmm.
go find help from somebody, because frankly, you may think you have the skills to self-facilitate and transform your own life and be okay. But as you said, absolutely, you will be running these unconscious program patterns that you had when you were a child without realizing it in your attractive relationship, that even though it doesn't look on the outside as being a reflection of what happened when you're younger, generally speaking, within time, it will start to show up. So going and see a therapist or a counselor, somebody can work you through this and change your wiring, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's the best thing you can do for yourself. So yeah, this is important.
Yeah, 100%. And even if even, we all know, we all have defaults. Even if you going slightly back into that behavior or that belief system, you you catch yourself. You go, oh,
Mhm.
I'm doing it again. I'm minimizing abusive behavior. You know, I know for me, I used to say, no, that I was always like, always the fixer, always trying to fix relationships. And I still catch myself doing it. I'm the one that
Mhm.
runs around collecting all the heads that have been lopped off and stitching them back on. Like, I wasn't. I said my sister was the off with your head, and I was always like, oh, let me fix this head.
Right.
So it's knowing your patterns. We always say this, Barry. It's the knowing ourselves inside and out, knowing what patterns or grooves were formed, and what may have worked for us as a child is not working for us as an adult, and recognizing that. And again, even things like the people pleasing, we talk about this so much as well. The people pleasing, oh, I have to stay in a relationship with somebody because, even though I'm not feeling comfortable in it anymore and I want to get out, which was the case with Alessia. She wanted out of her relationship. He was much older than her, much more controlling. And I mean, my God, escaping in the middle of the night with a little backpack with one toy each for your child to cross that bridge before it blew up in the Ukraine. I mean, what courage that took. And I think she
Yeah.
saw a side of herself and she knew that she could survive without this older, controlling man. He obviously had other ideas, but um, again, as I say, as you said, just knowing that that voice inside will always guide you. Please listen to it. It's not steering you wrong. Um, you're knowing who you are, not letting somebody else tell you who you are. That's also
That's
very important.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, and this is the thing we talked about this before. I mean, this thing. I mean, 90+ episodes into our show, we covered a lot of stuff around this conversation. So if you haven't listened to all our shows, go back and listen to some of them. They may reach out to you and hit your deeper levels. But in this reminder, one of the things that I'm very clear about is that we tend to have a chorus of voices in our head, 99% of which aren't ours, but they sound like ours because we've taken over the vocalization of the things that were taught us when we were kids
Yeah.
or when we're younger. So there's a quote I love that's kind of a joke, but it's the truth. It's like, don't believe everything you think.
Yeah.
We are definitely convenience machines in the sense that we like to default to what's the most common thing we think about in our minds, and that's why a lot of people's lives don't change, because we just trust what we keep saying to ourselves is still true. It's like, if it's not working for you, maybe you don't necessarily believe the voice you're hearing inside, and so it's definitely worth questioning, because it's like, same as you're saying, trust the inner guidance, absolutely, but at the same time there are voices in the head who are not our inner guidance that like to convince us because we will believe that, that's the way we were raised, what we believe when we were growing up. So questioning those voices, questioning those in quotes truths that aren't true,
Yeah.
to see if they work for you.
Yeah, I really want to make a point here because you bring up a really good point, and I want to talk about that differentiating between the busy monkey mind that
Mm.
is full of those voices, as you said, that are not ours. They are implanted. They're from our parents or our environment when we were a child. So that is like a agitated chatter in the head.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
You'll keep hearing it, and it usually is warning signs, fear, don't do that, or you're not good enough, all those types of voices. And it has a busy staticness to it. Now, there's also a deep, deep knowing. It's a grounded knowing. It comes from your gut. It's
Hmm.
it doesn't come in the form of this sort of repetitive negative chatter. It's a deep, deep knowing that that you are maybe not being respected, not being valued, not that you're being denied your rights as a human being. Those
Hmm.
That intuition inside, call it intuition, call it gut, call it God, call it whatever you want to call it, that is undeniable. And often
Yeah.
we suppress that because we don't want our lives to change. We don't want to leave our spouses, especially if we have children with them, and especially with having to sort of redo your whole life. I mean, like I said, with Alessia, she'd already survived a war. So I suppose in her mind, she was like, well, I survived this, so I can survive a separation. even
Hmm.
though her husband didn't want one. But
Right.
but deep inside, we know when something hasn't been right, and Leslie and I spoke about it, and she'd known for many years that this was relationship wasn't a relationship she wanted to be in, but she felt
Hmm.
trapped until she, as I said, experienced that incredible resilience within her and saw that she was a lot stronger than she thought she was, and
Right.
and she started to act on it. So yes, it's really important to differentiate. You know, a lot of people say to me, "How do you know the difference? How do you know the difference between the chatter and the deep knowing?" And I'll say, "You'll feel it. You'll feel it." And sometimes that deep knowing is not what you want to hear. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I knew when when how much I suppressed my deep knowing in my relationship. Like it was, I should have got out, I should have got out, and I was like, I had all the chatter in the head of why I couldn't, why I shouldn't, all of this stuff, wanting to give my children what I didn't have growing up, all of this stuff. But the deep knowing inside was, and let me make it perfectly clear, my husband was not physically violent. I just want to put that out there, but it was a very dysfunctional relationship. And many of the things that I described, you will find in a non physically violent relationship, but it's still psychologically extremely damaging. So don't wait to get hit. If any of these signs are appearing in your relationship, pay attention to them and protect yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the reason in a lot of ways where I mean, it can sound trite, but it's like if you're not seeing someone who can counsel you, who you can trust, because you got also got to vet your counselor, therapist type people as well. You don't just go see the first one you find. If you don't have one of those in your life, you might want to have one because having that resource, even if it's your minister or spiritual teacher, have somebody in life that is neutral and centered around you, who doesn't have a bias, but also can give you a clean reflection. Because the challenge is also when you're in the middle of this sort of thing, your own reflection can be distorted by what you see, as in what you're looking at isn't actually accurate because you're looking through a lens of the distorted behavior. So
Mhm.
having someone centered who's around who can really give you honest feedback, as painful as it might be or as difficult as it might be, can make you the best thing for your life because it gives you um, it's like having landmarks you can lean on and having navigation you can work with. Because the challenge for us when we're in the middle of these sort of situations is oftentimes we're in like a hall of mirrors. It's like so confusing and so difficult. We can't find our way out. And by having someone outside of the hall of mirrors, interesting analogy comes up, they can guide you because they can see where you really are
Yeah.
and where you want to be.
Yeah. And I also want to add something into that, which is absolutely right. You want a neutral person, not a family member, not
No.
a friend. They are wonderful and they're great support systems, but sometimes they have an agenda that they're not even aware of themselves.
Hmm.
It just so happened that it coincided with my learning about my friend Alessia. Was I saw an OJ thing, and they were talking about how, and this is not to blame her family by any means at all, but that OJ had been so sort of kind and generous to them and financially, and that they were sort of, there was a feeling of being indebted to him, and and sometimes, again, your family member, oh, friends even, they like you as a couple, and they'll
Hmm.
they'll be skewed, their opinion will be skewed, and it can skew you. I've had many
Right.
clients who again, their parents are still um influencing their choice in their partner, like, no, stay, he's not that bad, your children, think of your children, think of this, think of that. And again, I mean, it's all, like I said, don't ever become isolated from your family and your friends. You need them. But
Yes.
having that objective, as you said, that mirror to reflect back to you what you're saying to this counselor or therapist or coach or whoever, to reflect back to you honestly what they're hearing. Because we will allow ourselves to be influenced by other people and their needs and their wants.
Oh yeah. The challenge is that when you get feedback from somebody who's a family member or a friend, their feedback is not going to be accurate because they're not in the relationship.
Hmm.
They only see the surface. They only see the outside, which oftentimes with a narcissist or abusive partner, they show their best behavior in the outside world. So,
Absolutely.
of course, their friends are going to get one of things that don't match what your experience is. And so your belief or trust in your own experience can be dissipated by what people are convincing you by saying, well, he's not like that. They're not like this, they're like this.
No,
And
exactly.
so really having, as you said, that deeper internal guidance, intuition, gut feeling, whatever you want to call it, is the part that you want to listen to. And the challenge also, by the way, is one thing I have to know myself, is the chattering and chittering voices in our head, which keep giving us all that feedback, can be very busy to actually try and mask the truth from inside.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you've got to be willing to listen through the noise and the haze to get to that quietness inside. Because for me, the experience that voice inside is very quiet, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so solid. I know what it is,
Yeah.
and so it's discerning the difference.
Yeah. It can come in different ways. I've had it. I've had that voice inside that actually yell at me twice in
Mhm.
my life. One word, and it was so clear because I know what I was thinking about at the time. I remember what I was thinking about. It was nothing to do with the situation. And this voice came from like deep within, and I was like, whoa, where did that voice come from? And one of the voices, I had a spiritual teacher that I was was basically showing signs of being inappropriate. And I didn't
Mm.
want to see it. I wanted to keep them as this spiritual teacher. And so I had minimized some of the signs. And then one day I just heard this thing and it just said sheep in wolf's clothing. I'm sorry, I've got the other wolf in sheep's clothing. Sorry, I got it the wrong way around. Typical dyslexic. But it really hit me and I was like, whoa, no, that's not true. And it was true. But I needed
Mhm.
smacking around the head to see it. And I had to, and then another time I was in a relationship that was killing me, literally killing me. And I was minimizing and minimizing and minimizing me. I was a shell of the person I was when I first entered into the relationship. And the voice I heard from deep within just said, get out now before he kills you. And I knew it wasn't a physical threat, but I knew I was dying. I was a shell
Mm.
of the person I was. And again, it shocked me. It was such a whoa, where did that come from? Because it wasn't, as I said, I remember what I was thinking at the time, which was like, oh, my kids have left crumbs on the table and there's going to be ants here. I remember thinking that. And then to have this voice come in and say, so it can be loud, it can be a whisper, but the energy is inarguably for you, not against you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
really got to pay attention to that. It's your inner guidance, it's your inner wisdom, it's God, it's the universe, known by many names, but it is there to protect you and to guide you, and pay attention to that. The
Mhm.
fear-based arguing back with it of, oh, but I can't, how would I survive, how would that's just mental chatter. But the deep knowing inside, this is not a place I should be in. Please pay attention to that.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's been quite a conversation today.
I know. And next week we're going to talk about trad wives. We got an email wanting to talk more about this, about the trad wives, traditional wife, and I think this is a good follow up for the subject we've just talked about today, because there are some things we have to be aware of. Not that
Oh, yeah.
totally against traditional roles at all, but I think we need to dive deep into this subject.
But using TikTok trends as a guide for relationships isn't necessarily the smartest move, which is what this kind of is about. So we'll definitely get into that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, again. And yes, please pay attention to that inner knowing, that inner voice. It will never steer you wrong.
Right. And get the guidance you need when you want it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, everybody. See you all again next week. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Del. See you then.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.